My name is Tessa Vaughn, and I was 33 the night my mother handed me an eviction notice in front of 200 wedding guests and called it a gift. We were at the Belmont Harbor Country Club outside Chicago, the kind of place where the valet judges your car before you've even stepped out of it. My younger brother was getting married. The string quartet was playing something soft, and my mother, in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than I made in 2 months, took the microphone away from the toastmaster and said she had one more announcement before the cake. They never noticed the man sitting beside me, the one in the gray off-the-rack suit, the one who paid for half our groceries with cash because he said cards left a trail. They had no idea who my husband actually was or how fast he could turn their whole shining robe to ash. Let me back up because you need to understand what kind of family I come from, to understand why none of this made sense to anyone in that room. The Vaughns weren't old money, but they spent like they were. My father, Gerald, built a chain of orthopedic clinics across the Midwest, 11 locations by the time I left for college, and he liked to remind people that he'd put more knees back together than God. My mother, Cynthia, ran the front of the house, which meant she ran everyone's lives. They had a house in Lake Forest with a circular driveway and a guest wing nobody ever used, and a place in Scottsdale they flew to every February. The walls were covered in art they couldn't have named the artist of. The point wasn't the art. The point wasn't the art. The point was that they could afford it. I was supposed to be a doctor. That was the plan from the time I could hold a crayon. My father used to introduce me at dinner parties as the future Dr. Vaughn, like the title was already stitched into me. I went to Northwestern Pre-Med on schedule, 2009, and I had the grades for it. I sat through organic chemistry and physiology and I genuinely tried. But somewhere in my junior year I started volunteering at a hospice on the north side, just for the resume line, and something happened to me there that I've never been able to fully explain. There was a man named Walter, 81, no family that visited, dying of lung cancer in a shared room with a curtain for a wall. The nurses didn't have time to sit with him. The doctors came in for 90 seconds and left. But I'd sit and he'd talk, and over 6 weeks he told me his entire life, every regret, every joy, the woman he should have married, the son he hadn't spoken to in 30 years. When he died, I was the only one in the room holding his hand, and I realized that what I wanted wasn't to fix bodies. It was to be there for the parts medicine had no language for. I changed my major to social work the spring of senior year. The phone call from my mother lasted 4 minutes. I remember because I watched the timer on the screen. Social work, she said. The way you'd say a slur. Tessa. That's not a career, that's a charity you do to yourself. My father didn't even call. He sent a message through her. If I wasn't going to use the brain God gave me, they weren't going to keep funding the experiment. They cut me off that month. I finished my degree on student loans, $41,000 of them, and I didn't walk at graduation because no one was coming anyway. For years after that, I was the family ghost. I chilled to Thanksgiving and Christmas because my grandmother was still alive and she'd have been heartbroken otherwise, and I'd sit at the far end of the table while my brother, Spencer, no, I'm not going to call him that. That's too kind a name for what he became, while my brother Cade got the questions, the attention, the second helpings of pride. Cade went to Kellogg for his MBA and walked straight into my father's company as director of operations, a job invented for him, with a salary I'd have needed a decade to reach. He drove a leased Range Rover, the white one, and he had this way of asking about my work that made it sound like he was asking how my pet hamster was doing. Still saving the world one food stamp at a time, he said to me once at a family dinner, swirling a glass of wine he'd announced the price of. Everyone laughed. I cut my chicken into smaller and smaller pieces and said nothing. That was my survival skill. I'd learned that silence cost less than a fight I was always going to lose. My actual job, for the record, was as a caseworker for the county, then a program coordinator at a nonprofit on the west side that placed kids aging out of foster care into housing and jobs. I made $48,000 a year. I worked with 18-year-olds who had nobody, no parents, no safety net, no second chances, and I helped them not become a statistic. I had a wall of thank you cards in my apartment, taped up in a grid that I never showed anyone, not even my husband at first. I met Owen at a fundraiser of all places, which is funny in hindsight. Not a glamorous one. It was a chilly cook-off in a church basement in Pilsen, raising money for the housing program I worked for. He was standing near the radiator in a flannel shirt and jeans, holding a paper bowl, and he asked me which chili I'd voted for like it was the most important question in the world. We talked for 2 hours. He told me he did consulting work in the nonprofit space, that he helped foundations figure out where their money should go. I thought, finally, a man who understands what I do isn't a hobby. He drove a 2014 Honda CR-V with a dent in the rear bumper he never bothered to fix. He shopped at Aldi. He wore the same 3 sweaters on rotation all winter. When we got married 11 months later, it was at the courthouse downtown with 12 people, my grandmother, a few friends, his small circle. My parents weren't invited. I told myself it was to protect Owen from them. The truth was, I couldn't bear to watch them measure him and find him wanting. He insisted on splitting everything 50-50, rent on our 1-bedroom in Logan Square, groceries, the cheap vacations we took to Michigan in the summer. I loved that about him. It made me feel like an equal for the first time in my life, like I wasn't being managed. I didn't know yet that he could have bought the whole building we lived in without checking his balance. I should have known sooner. There were signs. About a year into our marriage, my laptop died and I borrowed his to finish a grant report. There was a browser tab open. A Crane's Chicago business article. The headline mentioned the Hartley Foundation, an endowment north of $2 billion that had quietly become one of the largest private funders of youth services in the country. And there was a photo of a man at a podium, in a suit I'd never seen, looking polished and serious and important. It was Owen. The caption called him the founder. I sat there with my heart going sideways. $2 billion. I closed the tab. I heard his key in the door. And I said nothing, because saying something meant asking why he'd hidden it. And asking that meant maybe finding out our whole life together was built on a lie I didn't want to find the bottom of. So I chose not to look. I told myself the photo could be anyone. I went to bed beside a man worth more than my father would earn in 50 lifetimes, and I held on to the version of him I understood. Looking back, I think I needed him to be ordinary. I'd spent my whole life being told my values were worthless. If the man who shared them turned out to be a billionaire, then maybe the world really did only reward what my family worshipped, and I couldn't survive believing that. So I let it go. 2 years ago, I brought him to a family dinner. My mother had been needling me about my mystery husband for months, and my grandmother wanted to meet him before she got too frail. The dining room, in Lake Forest Seats 14, there were crystal glasses and a centerpiece of white roses, and my father carving a roast like a surgeon. Owen wore khakis and a button-down. He looked perfect to me. Next to my father's monogrammed cufflinks and my brother's Italian loafers, he looked invisible. "So," my father said over the soup. "What is it you do, Owen?" "I work in philanthropy," Owen said. "Helping direct funding to community programs." My mother set down her spoon. "Oh, so nonprofit." She said the word the way you'd say bed bugs. "Yes, ma'am." Kate didn't look up from his phone the entire first course. My brother. He scrolled and smirked, and once turned the screen to show our mother something, and they both laughed quietly, and I knew it was about us. Owen left early. Said he had a call with the West Coast. After he was gone, my mother sipped her wine and gave me the look I'd been receiving my entire life, the one that came disguised as concern. "Sweetheart," she said, "you could have done so much better. A man with no ambition, driving that little car. What happens when you want children? When you want a real house?" "I love him," I said. "Love doesn't pay for college tuition, dear." On the train home that night, I thought about how quiet Owen had been, how his jaw had set when my mother said nonprofit. When I got back, he was on the couch with his laptop. He looked up and his face was hard to read. "I'm sorry about them," I said. "Don't apologize. They told me exactly who they are." He paused. "Tessa, if they ever really hurt you badly, I mean, you'll tell me, right? Promise me. It's just words," I said. "I'm used to it. Promise me anyway." "I promise." I broke that promise. 3 weeks before Cade's wedding, when the invitation arrived, I carried what was coming all by myself and never said a word. The invitation came to my work address, which was the first cruelty because they have my home address and chose not to use it. Heavy cardstock, gold foil, the kind of thing that costs $10 a piece. Cade was marrying a girl named Brett, an interior designer whose family owned half a suburb. The card requested the pleasure of my company, and clipped to it, in my mother's sharp slanting hand, was a note. Tessa, do try to dress for the occasion, and we'll have a place for your husband if he insists on coming. If he insists on coming. Like Owen was a coat I'd checked at the door. I showed it to Owen that night. He read it twice. Do you want to go? He's my brother, I said. Maybe this is them trying. They mailed this to your job. They called me your husband if he insists. This isn't an olive branch, Tess. I know, and I did know. But there's a part of me that never stopped being 9 years old. The part that still believed if I just showed up enough, behaved well enough, smiled wide enough, they'd finally see me. If I don't go, they'll say I'm the bitter one, that I can't be in a room with my own family. He pulled me in and rested his chin on the top of my head. Okay, then we go. But I'm going with you. Whatever happens in that room, you're not walking into it alone. You won't even own a real suit, I said into his shirt, half laughing. Gray suit. Final offer. The seating chart arrived by email a week later, sent by the wedding coordinator, not my mother. I was at table 19. I pulled up the diagram and zoomed in. Tables 1 through 6 clustered around the head table, family and the people my parents wanted to impress. Table 19 was against the back wall by the kitchen doors, the table where they put the coworkers nobody likes and the second cousins who had to be invited. My name was on it. Owen's wasn't listed at all, just Tessa Vaughn plus guest. Then the text started, from Cade's fiancé's account, but I knew my mother's voice in them. Black tie means black tie, not your work clothes. Maybe skip making any speeches, lawful way. FYI, table 19 is the overflow table, you understand. We had to prioritize Cade's professional contacts. 8 of them over 6 days, each one a small paper cut. I didn't answer a single one. I read them at night and deleted the notifications and felt my stomach pull tight like a fist. Owen noticed me going quiet. She's texting you, isn't she? It's nothing new, Tess. It's fine. It's just words. The night before the wedding, I laid my dress out on the bed. Navy, knee-length, $90 at Nordstrom Rack, and I'd told myself it was an investment, something I could wear to galas for work. Owen's gray suit hung beside it, our armor. He came out of the shower and saw me standing there, staring at it. We don't have to go, he said, for maybe the 5th time that day. Yes, we do. If I don't show, I prove their point. I need them to see I'm fine, that their opinion doesn't break me. He sat down beside me. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. That's exactly how I know you are. The strong ones doubt. It's the weak ones who never question themselves. Then his phone rang and he stepped out onto the back porch to take it, and through the window I heard fragments. Professional. Low. Confirm the announcement for after the reception, yes. No, she doesn't know yet. I'll tell her when the time's right. She doesn't know yet. I lay awake until almost 3, watching headlights cross the ceiling, wondering what I didn't know. The Belmont Harbor Country Club at 6 in the evening looked like a movie set. White columns, a fountain in the circular drive, men in tuxedos handing women out of black cars. We took the Honda. The valet looked at our dented bumper the way you'd look at something tracked in on a shoe, and Owen tipped him $20 anyway and said, "Thank you by name." He always did that. He read everyone's name tag. Inside, the ballroom opened up gold and enormous 250 people, a band tuning on a riser, ice sculptures already starting to sweat. The head table glowed with white roses and tall candles. I found table 19 against the back wall by the swinging kitchen doors, and I felt my face go hot. The centerpiece was a single low bowl of carnations, the grocery store kind, while every other table had cascading roses. Our table had water pitchers. The other tables had bottles of wine breathing on the linen. A coordinator with a headset checked her list. Vaughn? Right, table 19 in the back. She pointed without looking up. We walked the length of the room, past table 1, where my mother held court in champagne silk and saw me coming and gave me a smile with nothing behind it, past my father shaking hands, clapping shoulders, a man entirely at home in the only world he believed was real, past my brother Cade near the head table, phone in hand, taking photos of himself. 5 people were already at 19, none of them I knew. A woman about my age in a sensible dress gave me a tired smile as we sat. "Corporate tables, am I right?" she said. "I'm Owens. I'm with the catering company actually. They sat me with the randoms. Her name was on a little card. Mine wasn't. Owens wasn't. 2 blank place settings. Like we were interchangeable, like we could have been anyone or no one. The salads came out. Every table got a beautiful plate, microgreens, shaved parmesan, candied walnuts. Table 19 got iceberg lettuce with ranch and a paper cup on the side. The woman beside me, the catering one, snorted softly. "Guess we're the kids' table." Owen laughed, but I saw his jaw do the thing. Cade came by once, during the appetizers, with his phone already filming. "Tessa, you made it. Loud performed for an audience." He panned to Owen. "And this is, sorry, remind me?" "Owen," my husband said flatly. "Right, Owen." Cade gave a little laugh to the friend hovering behind him, another guy in a too tight suit. "They took the Honda. Can you believe it? Anyway, enjoy the party. I know it's not exactly your usual scene." He drifted off, already typing, already posting, and I watched him tag it and felt the old acid rise in my throat. Owen put his hand on my knee under the table. "Breathe," he said quietly. I breathed. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. The table next to us had watched the whole thing, and I saw the worst thing of all in their faces, which was pity. The toast started after the dinner plates were cleared. The best man, the maid of honor, my father, who stood with a glass and talked for 10 minutes about Cade, the son who'd made him proud, the future of the Vaughn name, the legacy. He did not say my name once. I sat at table 19 by the kitchen doors and listened to my own father describe his children and pretend he had one. And then my mother took the microphone. "Before we cut the cake," she said, her voice carrying bright and clear through the room, "I have one more little announcement, a family matter." She smiled. She looked directly at me. "Some of you know my daughter Tessa. She's here tonight in the back." 250 heads turned. I felt every one of them land on me. "Tessa, would you come up here, sweetheart?" I didn't move. I couldn't. Owen's hand closed over mine. "You don't have to," he murmured. But I did, because not going would have been ammunition for the rest of my life. See how she sulks. See how she can't even be gracious at her brother's wedding. I stood. The walk from table 19 to the head table was the longest of my life. Past the pity, past the phones coming up, past my brother filming with a grin he wasn't even trying to hide. My mother handed me an envelope. Cream cardstock, heavy, the same stock as the invitation. "Happy belated birthday, by the way," she said into the microphone, and the room chuckled because my birthday had been the month before and no one had called. "We wanted to give you something practical." I opened it with shaking hands, 2 pages. A property management letterhead I half recognized. My eyes caught on the words before my brain could brace. I'd been renting our apartment, I should explain, from a holding company. What I had not known, what I learned standing at the front of my brother's wedding, was that the building was owned by my parents. They'd bought it as an investment 3 years earlier. They'd been our landlords the entire time and never told me, and collected our rent through a shell company every single month while I thought I was finally living somewhere they had no hand in. The pages were a notice of non-renewal, 60 days to vacate, signed by my father, signed by my mother, and at the bottom, signed by Cade, who apparently held a stake in the holding company too. "We've decided to sell the property," my mother said sweetly, for everyone to hear. "And frankly, Tessa, it's time you and Owen stood on your own 2 feet. No more handouts. We thought a wedding was the perfect occasion for a fresh start. From all of us." She raised her glass. The room didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. Some did both. Cade zoomed in on my face, waiting for me to break, to cry, to beg. My grandmother, I noticed, was not in the room. Later I learned they'd timed this for when she'd gone to lie down. I looked at the pages. I looked at my mother. And something in me went very still and very clear. I had spent 20 years walking back into rooms like this one, hoping. This was my answer. It had always been my answer. I just refused to read it. I folded the papers along their crease. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, and my voice did not shake, which surprised even me. "Thank you for making it official." And I turned to walk back to my husband. That was when a woman at table 3 stood up so fast her chair scraped. "Owen?" she said. Loud, confused, cutting clean across the room. "Owen Mercer?" Everyone froze. Owen, halfway out of his chair to come meet me, went still. The woman came around her table. She was maybe 50, silver bob, a navy dress that whispered serious money, and I recognized her a half-second before my mother did. Renata Salco. She was a state senator. She'd been on the news that week about an education bill. "My God, it is you," she said. "I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. I thought we weren't seeing you until the foundation announcement on." She stopped. She looked at me. She looked at the envelope in my hand, at table 19 behind me, at the head table where my mother stood with her champagne flute frozen halfway up. And I watched the whole thing reassemble itself behind the senator's eyes. "Wait, you're Tessa? You're Owen's wife? They sat you?" She didn't finish. "They don't know who I am," Owen said quietly. To her. To the room. And that's how I wanted it. It moved through that ballroom like a current through water. I heard it start at table 5. Owen Mercer, the Hartley Foundation. That's the Hartley guy. Then table 7. 2.5 billion. Google it right now. Phones came out all over the room, screens lighting up like a field of fireflies, and I stood at the front of my brother's wedding and watched 250 people discover, in real time, who I had married. A man in his 60s stood up from table 4 and walked toward Owen with his hand already out. "Owen, I thought that was you. I sit on the Northwestern Medicine Board Your Literacy Initiative in the Southside schools. My wife volunteers with it." He shook Owen's hand like he was grabbing a lifeline. "What on earth are you doing back by the kitchen?" My father came down off the dais. His face had gone the color of paper. "What is happening?" he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a man trying to keep his footing on ground that was tilting. The senator turned to him. "Renata." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "You just publicly humiliated the wife of Owen Mercer," she said. "Do you understand that? The Hartley Foundation funds more youth services in this state than your entire industry donates in a decade, and you handed her an eviction notice as a party favor." My mother made a sound I'd never heard her make. Air leaving a body. "How much?" my father started and then couldn't finish, because even he knew the question was obscene. Somebody at table 6 said the number out loud. 2.6 billion. It's on Cranes. It's on Forbes. I will tell you the part that broke me, and it wasn't the money. A woman crossed the room from table 3, elegant, gray-haired, and she took my hand in both of hers. "You're Tessa," she said. "I've heard your name for 3 years. I advise the foundation. Every time we evaluate a youth housing grant, Owen asks the same question. He asks, 'What would Tessa do?'" She held my eyes. "He talks about your work the way most people talk about the person they admire most in the world. You're the reason half our portfolio looks the way it does." I turned to look at Owen. He'd never told me that, not once. And he was looking back at me with an expression I'd never quite seen, like he'd been waiting a long time and was finally allowed to stop. The senator wasn't done. She walked up the steps to the dais and picked up the microphone my mother had set down, and she tapped it twice. "I'm sorry to interrupt the celebration," she said, warm, in complete command of the room, "but since we're all here, I think now is the right moment for an announcement that was scheduled for next week." She let it settle. The Hartley Foundation is making the largest single private investment in youth and family services in the history of Cook County, $40 million over 5 years. Even in a room of wealthy people, there were gasps. It will fund transitional housing for young adults aging out of foster care. job training, mental health services, and it will create a new directorship to oversee the entire initiative. She found my eyes across 250 people. That position has been offered to Tessa Mercer, and she's accepted. The room had gone utterly silent. Renata wasn't reading from anything now. Some of you don't know what Tessa does, so let me tell you. For 9 years she's worked with the kids nobody else will fight for, 18-year-olds turned out of the foster system with a trash bag of clothes and nowhere to go. Her program has the lowest homelessness rate of any in the state. Last year, a young woman she placed graduated from community college and came back to volunteer. She looked directly at my mother. That is impact. That is a life's work that matters. And Owen didn't build a $40 million initiative around her because she's his wife. He built it because she is the best person he has ever met at doing this. The applause started somewhere in the back and rolled forward, and it was not polite applause, it was the real thing, people on their feet. Table 19 stood first, the catering woman whooping. The head table stayed sitting, my family frozen, unable to stand, because standing would mean admitting they'd been wrong. I learned the rest in pieces over the following minutes and the following months. Renata told the room that the grant had been finalized weeks earlier, that the announcement was meant for a quiet press conference, and that Owen had insisted on waiting. He'd said he wanted me to take the job because I was running towards something, not away from my family. He'd known for weeks. He'd sat across from me at our IKEA table eating cheap pasta, knowing, and he'd said nothing, because he wanted my yes to be mine. I found out later why he'd never told me about the money in the first place. I finally asked him, that night, in the Honda in the country club parking lot, both of us too wrung out to drive yet, why didn't you tell me who you were? He was quiet for a while. When I was 26, he said, I came into a lot of money very fast, and every person in my life rearranged themselves around it. Friends, women, family. I stopped being able to tell who saw me and who saw the number. He looked at me. Then I met a woman in a church basement who voted for the chili made by the kids in her program because she said they tried the hardest. And I thought, she has no idea who I am, and she's the realest thing I've ever stood next to. I wanted, just once, to be loved by someone who couldn't be bought. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I was a coward about the one thing I'm not usually a coward about. I wasn't angry. I'd known after all in my own way. We'd both been protecting the same fragile thing. The aftermath was its own kind of justice, though I take less pleasure in it than you'd think. 2 of my father's biggest referral partners were in that room, and within a month both had quietly distanced themselves. It's not a good look, apparently, to send your patients to a man who evicts his own daughter for entertainment. My brother's wedding video, the part he filmed of my face, posted before he understood what was happening, got passed around enough that his fiancé's family started asking questions, and the marriage was annulled before the first anniversary. Cade lost his invented job during a restructuring 8 months later. My mother sent flowers to my office once. I donated them to the waiting room. We didn't have to move out, of course. Renata, it turned out, mentioned the eviction as wedding favor to a reporter she trusted, and the holding company quietly decided not to sell after all. And not long after that, we bought a place of our own anyway. A real one. With money I'd finally stopped pretending didn't exist. I kept the eviction notice. It's in a drawer in my desk. I look at it sometimes, not with anger anymore, with something closer to gratitude. They handed me proof, in front of 250 people, that I'd been right to stop waiting. My grandmother lived another year. When she died, she left me her wedding ring and a note that said she'd always known I was the brave one. I wear it now. These days, I run the directorship. 3 new housing sites opened last spring. There's a kid named Marcus, not his real name. I'll keep that private, who came through our program at 18 with nothing and started college this fall. And he calls me on Sundays just to talk, the way Walter used to talk to me in that hospice all those years ago. Last Thanksgiving, we had 11 people in our home, none of them blood, all of them family in the way that actually counts, eating food from 4 different countries and laughing too loud, and Owen leaned over and said, "Better than Lake Forest?" And I laughed so hard I cried. I used to think a family was the people you were born to, the table you were assigned, the chart someone else made of where you belonged. I know better now. Family is the people who hold your hand when you're dying, and the people who vote for your kids' chili, and the man in the gray suit who sees exactly who you are and decides, every single day, that it's you. Sometimes the cruelest thing a person can do to you is also the kindest, because it finally sets you free. They thought they were putting me out on the street. What they actually did was hand me the door I'd been too afraid to walk through. And on the other side of it was every good thing I have. For a long time, I believed the cruelty in my family was just bad luck. The kind of thing that happens to you for no reason. I don't believe that anymore. Nothing in that ballroom happened by accident. My parents spent 30 years deciding that a person's worth could be measured in salary and square footage, and the night they handed me an eviction notice at Cade's wedding was simply the harvest of seeds they'd planted my whole life. You cannot teach yourself, day after day, that money is the only real thing, and then act surprised when it blinds you to the billionaire sitting quietly at the back table. Cause and effect. They reaped exactly what they sowed, and so in a gentler way did I. Because here's what I've come to understand. The reason I survived all those years at the far end of the table wasn't luck either. It was 3 things I built without knowing I was building them. The first was simply refusing to become like them. When Cade mocked my work and my mother sneered the word nonprofit, the easiest thing would have been to grow hard and cruel right back, to start measuring people the way they did. I didn't. I kept sitting with the dying, kept fighting for kids with trash bags of clothes, kept choosing kindness even when kindness got me seated next to the kitchen doors. That refusal to let bitter people make me bitter is the only reason a man like Owen could look at me in a church basement and see something worth a lifetime. The second was paying attention to what was actually true instead of what I was told to want. My family handed me a definition of success, and I had the clear-headedness, eventually, to set it down and pick up my own. Walter taught me that, holding my hand all those years ago, real understanding isn't agreeing with the loudest voice in the room. It's looking honestly at your own life and asking what genuinely matters, and then having the nerve to live by your answer, even when everyone you love calls it a mistake. And the third was endurance. Plain, unglamorous endurance. 20 years of walking back into rooms that wounded me, of cutting my food into smaller pieces instead of screaming, of staying soft without staying weak. Owen said it best, the night before the wedding, that the strong ones are the ones who doubt themselves and keep going anyway. Strength was never about not being hurt. It was about not letting the hurt turn me into someone I'd be ashamed of. If you take anything from what my family did to me, let it be this. Guard your character when people try to shame you out of it. Think for yourself when the whole table is telling you what to want, and outlast the people who underestimate you, not to defeat them, but so that one day you're still standing, still kind, still yours. The eviction notice is in my desk drawer. It reminds me that the door they slammed was the door I walked through into my real life.